Honored to have two very special guests this week. To my far right, jockey James Graham, and to my close right, trainer Tom Amoss. We'll start with James. James went to the Ireland Jockey School and wound up coming here to America under the tutelage of Jeff Thornberry. He began his career by riding his first winner in 2003 at River Downs, leading rider at Arlington in 2011, top 5 at Fairgrounds multiple times since 2004, 17th in the country this year with 87 wins, 2,023 career victories. James, how many graded stakes wins do you have? Give me a guess.
About 25 maybe.
One more, 26.
25.
Very
That's
good.
good.
See,
Wow.
that's the closest.
I guarantee you I won't get that close.
You're next.
You're
Okay,
on the
so
money.
here's Tom Amoss's background. He went to LSU. He has a marketing degree. He and trainer Al Stahl were actually college roommates, born in New Orleans. Tom has 3,142 wins. Career training win percentage, 25.6%, which I find absolutely ridiculous. He's 19th in the country this year with 59 wins. 10-time leading trainer at the Fairgrounds. First win came in 1987 at Sportsman's Park.
It did.
And Tom,
I remember it well.
How many graded stakes wins do you have?
You know what? I'd embarrass myself if I even guessed. I don't know. Go ahead. Come on, tell me.
43.
43. I would have guessed 50.
Okay, so that's good. 43 is a good number. And I remember one of those first graded stakes wins, 1994 at Arlington, a horse by the name of Maristani.
Oh, yeah.
You made me look smart. You paid $17 that day, and I picked him.
It was the Stars and Stripes.
That was the Stars and Stripes.
Yeah, I remember that one.
And I felt really good about that. I'm like, man, this Tom Amoss guy, he can train a little bit.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun. That might have been before James's time.
Long before.
Yeah. So I've been doing this for a while.
So you guys, I mean, we're going to get into the Belmont, we're going to get into your careers, but first I want to just start by telling everybody the last 5 years, and this is, one of the major reasons you guys are on together, James has ridden 523 horses for you in the last 5 years. 135 wins, 26% wins, 61% in the money, 27% in sprints, 23% in routes, 29% wins last year. So I guess, Tom, the first thing that I should say is, how did you're very loyal to riders, I've noticed this. Leandro Goncalves at Canterbury, you ride him a lot. How did this relationship start between the two of you guys?
My love affair with James Graham then, as it is now, is twofold. It's number one, James' hard work ethic. In the morning, he works a lot of my horses, gets to know them. He wants to know them before he rides them. And secondly, in the afternoons, so often we see riders that aren't going to win a race, maybe coasting to the line, not giving their full effort. James gives you 100%. I can name some numerous examples of horses at the eighth pole that I didn't think were going to win and that other riders might have given up on, that James continued to ride and won on. So I love his work ethic. I love his desire to win that matches mine. And sometimes that makes for a little volatile relationship after the races when it doesn't when it doesn't go right. But in the end, we're good friends.
Yeah, definitely. Riding for Tom has really, really good moments and a very few little bad ones.
Come on, don't maybe you have to be a bad guy. That's not true.
Few little bad ones.
Well, here, if you're winning 26%, that means you're losing 74%.
Yeah, so about, if that's 3/4 of the time, at least a quarter of those times, we might have a disagreement after the race as to how the horse was ridden.
Yeah. And that's okay.
Yeah, look, we both want to win, and from a handicapper's point of view, if you've got a trainer that wants to win and a rider that wants to win at all times,
right,
and I certainly try to enter him that way, and James tries to ride him that way, then you've got an advantage.
Definitely. And do you, people ask this all the time as a trainer, do you provide instructions to the rider, or is it a discussion, or never, or how does that work?
Very little. If I have a horse that has a bad habit or something's going on there, I'll always advise the rider as to what that habit is. But in the end, we talk a little bit about pace and what we think the race is going to set up like. But oftentimes, races don't set up, from a handicap point of view, you know this. Right. Oftentimes, races don't set up the way you think they're going to set up. And at that point, the rider's got to freelance. He's got to do what he thinks is best. So I do not give a lot of instructions.
Do you prefer that, James?
Well, working a lot of Tom's horses, you kind of figure out where they need to be, looking at the form they're going to show you. If Tom says, look, we might need to make a little more use from wasn't getting there in time last time, and that's about the height of it. He doesn't give a whole lot of instructions, just relays to you what you're already thinking yourself, which gives your confidence going out there to where races are.
Yeah, let me add to that. So look, I fell in love with racing when I was about 12 years old, and I was a handicapper. And I was a handicapper all through high school. I worked at the track. I worked at the track in college, but of course continued to handicap, and I still handicap now. So if I see a race that lacks speed, and I have a speed horse, I'm going to certainly present that to James. When James comes to the paddock, he's also looked at the racing form as well. So the best riders, and I don't mean to speak for riders, but the best riders read the form and they know how to handicap. Do you agree with that?
Yes, sir. Definitely. Definitely.
Yeah.
It makes a big plus. You know your competition.
Right.
You know who's liable to do silly stuff in a race, and you're able to go on and use your horses to the best of his ability. And if you can do that and it all works out, you're in the winner's circle. So.
Yeah, it's amazing when I've walked through the jocks room at times to see how few riders are actually looking at the racing form. I remember with Churchill one time years ago, I'm walking through the jocks room, and the only racing form in the whole place was Pat Day, and he was going through it top to bottom. And
Bailey too is a big one.
Yeah, Bailey.
Those are great examples, right?
Yeah.
They're great riders. So I heard someone make the comment at the fairgrounds a couple of years ago, and it always stuck with me. Speaking about a specific rider, they said he invents speed. Meaning, it doesn't matter what he's on, they're going to show speed. And so when you've got riders like that, and certainly there are a lot of them out there like that, that makes your job sometimes easier and sometimes more difficult depending upon what kind of horse you have.
Yeah, like remember early fires at Arlington?
He invents speed.
He was just
And
saying.
E.T. Baird and Robbie's good on the speed. I mean, there's different kinds. Some are just good gate riders. But
And by the way,
invent it.
Fires may not be a good example because he's a Hall of Fame guy.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
he's
You know,
awesome.
but there are riders that invent speed that don't come out on the winning end often.
Yeah, but I think it's a great point. I mean, when some of the best riders, and Pat Day and Jerry Bailey are great examples, is they were looking at the form, they're handicapping. Remember the day Thunder Gulch won the Florida Derby, and Bailey was riding that day, and he won 6 races that day. Well, he won 6 races not only because he was the best rider on good horses, but there was a golden rail, and he got every one of his horses over to the rail and won 6 races on a 10-race card. You know, and it's like sometimes people like to look and say, "Oh, he's got all this talent." Well, it takes a lot of smarts to put it all together.
Yeah, that's the same thing in any sport too. You can
Of
have
course.
all the talent in the world, but you've got to know your game. You got to know your competition, and it's a major, major advantage. So we're going to talk Belmont. We're going to talk about your careers. We're going to start with the Belmont. I know we have some fan questions too. Let's talk about the Belmont Stakes first, Tom. And I want to start obviously with War Story, the Kentucky Derby, thinking about Belmont, and then kind of rerouting. When you've got a good 3-year-old like that, people want to be on the big stage. The owners want to be on the big
Right.
stage. It's awesome to be a part of that. But at the same time, you've got to take advantage of your 3-year-old season because there's money to be made,
Well, I think you hit it right in the head.
right?
In the 3-year-old year, there's money to be made. There are a lot of derbies out there that are not the Kentucky Derby. In the case of War Story, and particularly speaking of Ron Palucci that owns War Story, he does recognize that he's got a good horse. And he also recognizes he's got to spot him effectively to make as much of his investment come back as possible. It's my responsibility as a trainer to always present what I think is the best plan for a racehorse, whether it's a 3-year-old that's running in derbies or a horse that's running for claim. In the end, it's the owner's decision to either follow my instructions or to do what he wants to do. And I'm an employee, so I'm going to do what he wants to do. Ron and I talked about the Belmont. For a while, Ron thought that was the right move. He decided it wasn't. Our plan is going to be to run in the Ohio Derby with War Story. And I think it's a valid plan, a smart plan, and I give credit for Ron to taking out the idea of the glory of a certain race and recognizing the potential of running another. Don't forget, this is the same owner that won the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Fillies with Ria Antonio at some 50-1 odds or thereabouts.
Right.
So he knows how to plan for a race and say, I'm going to win this race no matter what the world thinks. But in the case of War Story, the Ohio Derby is where we're going, and that's the decision we made together.
Very good.
That's got to be tough. I mean, we see that every year Derby week too. There's horses that are on the cusp, and then sometimes you can kind of see the trainers kind of saying, "Well, maybe we should wait." And there's a little bit of a, I don't know,
Right.
public and private discussion and going back and forth.
I think 90% of the derbies, the Kentucky derbies that are run, I think you can break down the field into horses that have legitimate chance to win, horses that on their resume deserve to be in the race and are in there, and then a group that perhaps don't belong. Of course, Mind That Bird shattered that, and there are a few others that have as well. Right. But War Story belonged in that race. He had the right resume. He deserved to be in there. It didn't go our way. We had a bad trip. So you back up and you go to plan B.
Yeah, the Derby's only one race, right?
Exactly right.
Especially with the 3-year-old and having that opportunity. That being said, you're very familiar with the characters in this race, and obviously we're going for a Triple Crown, and we all had a discussion before we came on camera about the chances of this Triple Crown, the other horses in the race. So I'd like to get both of your feelings about just how good American Pharoah is before Saturday. We'll see if he's able to make history on Saturday. And then the competition and how they all got there, because we've got a couple of really good shooters that have waited the 5 weeks that, are going to make them earn it.
Well, James knows the horse as well as I do, so I'm going to let him start.
Well, it's American Pharoah. He's done nothing wrong. You can see it on his form, but I don't know. It's coming back awfully quick off a couple of good races, good hard races. He's been running hard since the start of the year, so I can't see him yet though.
Yeah, so James brings up a very good point. Yeah. So it's all about the proximity of the race. So you're talking about American Pharoah's 3rd race in 5 weeks. So he wins the Derby. He not only wins the Preakness, but does it in an impressive fashion. But when you break down that Preakness race and you say, looking back on it, that the 2nd and 3rd place horse from the Derby that ran against American Pharoah in the Preakness, if you make the statement that they did not run their races that day in Baltimore, right, and they most certainly did not, then what is the field? And the field wasn't that good beyond those 2 horses. So, Dortmund didn't run his race that day. Firing Line didn't run his race that day. What was there behind those horses? Somebody had to be 2nd. Somebody had to be 3rd. Pay close attention to American Pharoah out of the gate. He leaves kind of ordinary. He's ridden hard away from there. He got his track with the rain that occurred leading into the race. So I think that race was an effort, not just this simple go around there on the best horse. So now you're coming into into the Belmont, and you have a trainer like Pletcher, who has a proven formula for winning the Belmont by skipping the Preakness with some of his horses. He knows how to win this race. He's waiting there with materiality. It's his home track. I think he's a formidable opponent, and I also think the same of Frosted. I think they're both formidable opponents. Look, in the 70s, we had 3 Triple Crown winners in Affirmed, Seattle Slew, and Secretariat. We almost had a 4th with Spectacular Bid, who didn't win the Belmont. And everybody thought winning the Triple Crown was rather ordinary. We haven't had another one since. Now everybody's saying we need to change the format. We need to do this to make it easier on the Derby winner and the Preakness winner. Well, it's about being a champion. And it's about being able to handle this to win those races. It's about being great. And the truth is we haven't had a great horse since then. Certainly horses have gone on to show they're really, really good, but great is an overused word. If American Pharoah does it on Saturday, he's a great horse.
Yeah, it is going to be, I think, a tall task for him. I mean, there was an interesting stat that all the Triple Crown winners have never beaten a field more than 8 horses.
More than 7.
More than 7.
Right. He's got to face 7. He's got to face 7. So he's right there after the two defections. There's a lot going against him. I mean, I think the fact that the 2 best horses kind of have different running styles. Materiality is going to take an early shot at him, you would think. Mm-hmm. Frosted's going to take a late shot at him. I don't think anybody in the race. I think Keen Ice, will run well. How well, what does that mean? Buttigieg, I thought he would run better in the Derby. But I think if somebody's going to beat him on a fair racetrack, it's going to be either one of those 2 scenarios where it's Materiality just wearing him down, or it's Materiality taking a shot at him and wearing him down enough. Right. Mm-hmm. One of those 2 scenarios.
I agree with that. And, it's funny, Mark, you talk about the size of the fields, but along with that statistic, and I know you know this as well as I do, the Derby has changed.
Right.
In 1979 was my first Kentucky Derby, and I came here and I watched Spectacular Bid run, and I think the field was 8 or 9. Back then it wasn't 20 horses every race in the Kentucky Derby. Now In 2015, it's always a full gate of 20 horses, minus maybe a scratch late there, here or there. So that statistic, although valid, is maybe more geared towards the fact that we just haven't had a Triple Crown winner since the 70s because everything has changed since then.
It has changed a lot. I mean, we've got bigger fields, and we've got the point system now has changed things a little bit.
Correct.
Do you think, Tom, from a owner and trainer's perspective, all this focus on the rankings, the future wager that says these are the top 23 best horses, the rankings say the top 25, does it almost put these owners in a position where they feel like they're compelled to run because I'm the 19th best horse, I should be running?
Well, I think it's a race you want to run in. I mean, I don't think there's an owner that gets in the business that doesn't dream about winning a big race like the Kentucky Derby. And I can tell you as a trainer, I'm the same way. Who wouldn't want to win a race like that? So I think it's easy to get caught up in the idea of winning a race like that with the horse you have. I mean, look, my record in the Kentucky Derby is last, second to last, third to last, and fifth. So there's certainly been times when we've run the race where I look back on it that maybe that wasn't the best move, and the owners certainly would have said, hey, Tom, if you don't want to run this race, we're not going to run in it. But I was caught up in it just as much as they were. Maturity in training as well as riding is a big deal, So in any case, I do think that's valid.
Now, James, a lot of people say that the Belmont, especially at 1.5 miles, is a rider's race as much as it is a stamina race for the horse. You're actually riding in a 1.5 mile race on Saturday at Belmont. That's not the Belmont, but talk more in general terms about riding a race of that distance on that kind of track and how you might ride it differently than any other route race that you might be on a horse.
Like we go to it again, we're looking at horses with pedigree that suggests stamina and hopefully that they handle the track that they're going to. A lot of horses that are running in the race that I'm riding in are up there already. They're already training at Belmont. I'm coming in, shipping in off Churchill, which is a pretty decent surface. And I'm going to ride my horse the same way I rode him when I went the grade 2 on him at the fairgrounds. He likes to be fairly close. He's not one that's going to help you anywhere. You have to help him along. You have to tell him what he needs to do. And he's just going to have to keep pecking and pecking and pecking at him, keep going after him, because he will keep going. We know that from all the time I've rode him. Over the years, he's always been coming again late. And that's, even when Tom had him, he'd always come again late.
So I'm laughing because I had this horse.
We're talking about
George.
Call Me George, who's in the Brooklyn.
So Call Me George is a horse that has to be ridden. I mean, I don't know if James would agree with me, but he certainly when I had him, he was a horse that had to be ridden, and he's gotten smarter through the years. When he first started, he broke his maiden for $15,000.
Wow.
He really didn't have a very good understanding of racing, and you really had to make him do it. So James is going to ride him 1.5 miles on Saturday, and
he's going to be tired.
I wouldn't be asking James a lot of questions after the race because he's going to be catching his breath because he's going to have to ride the whole way. And that's not to suggest Call Me George isn't a good horse. He's a good horse now.
James, what goes into the decision to say you have 7 live mounts on a Saturday at Churchill, some younger horses you've been waiting on, maybe a baby that's running that you've been really looking forward to. But then you have this opportunity to go to Belmont to ride in the stake aboard a horse that you've already won a grade 2. Is there any decision, or do you always want to be in the graded stake versus riding multiple horses where you have multiple chances to win?
Well, we always want to be riding multiple horses, but to find good horses going in good races, it's hard to do because good races don't happen every day. You haven't got the top elite of what you're going to run against. And it'll put a stepping stone for horses all over the country this weekend. They're going to see the horses running sprinting. Are they going to go further down the line? Are they going to be done? Do they want to do this? Milers, will they stretch out? Will they get 1.25 miles at the back end of the year? Horses like Call Me George, if he runs his race, I think he's got a decent shot to be right in the mix of it. If everything works out for him, But taking off 6 or 7 winners at Churchill Downs on
No,
a
you-
Saturday.
You're riding 6 or 7 winners to Churchill Saturday. Well, that puts you in the
No,
record
but
book.
you know what I mean. It's taking
Live
off 6
mounts,
or 7
yeah.
live mounts. It's
Yeah.
but we need these. This is what we come out every morning for
Yeah.
at 5 o'clock.
And he's been good to you. You won a
Yeah.
grade 2 honor.
Yeah, exactly.
What about riding Belmont? Like riding the 1.5 miles? You're on that turn. You're hitting that second turn, and you're still going. I mean, that turn is just forever before you
Yeah.
can get to the top of the stretch.
But you know, he's not the only one that has to deal with it.
Yeah, true.
No, he's not the only one that has to deal with it, but he's also not the only jockey that has to deal
Right.
with
I'm
it.
just talking
And
about
I think riding a track that's 1.5 miles in circumference,
Yeah.
like Belmont is, can be very confusing for some of the riders that don't ride there on a regular basis. We write very few 1.5 mile races in this country.
Right.
So to be really prolific at understanding pace, going 1.5 miles, you don't get many opportunities to do that. So I do think experience, particularly over the Belmont surface, is a great advantage in the Belmont Stakes.
Yeah.
No, definitely. And I mean, how much do you think it matters that Victor Espinosa had that chance last year?
Right.
It didn't work out with Chrome,
Yeah,
but now
all the
he
jockeys
gets
in
it back
Yeah, I
again.
think that's a great question. A great question. You know, he's riding a horse, American Pharoah, that has the one attribute I would like to have in any horse that I train, and that is tactical speed.
Right.
Tactical speed is the best attribute a horse can have. You're not looking at the form and saying it has to set up this way or it has to set up that way. You've got a horse that can adapt to any pace scenario, and if you've got a good rider, he knows to adapt to it. If the pace is fast, he'll back up a little bit. If the pace is slow, he's going to be right there. And so that is a tough horse to beat.
Yeah, that's really interesting when you look at it that way. Going back to the Preakness, he made that decision. He said when it started to rain, he jumped to the lead, and that worked out. And, going back to, if we could turn back the clock to California Chrome last year, I don't know if you have any opinions, but, we spent a lot of time interviewing the connections after the Derby, and they talked a lot about how this horse wanted to have a target and this and that. And I was kind of like, he's a front runner that can rate, but he doesn't need a target.
Yeah.
And I think they sort of convinced themselves of that, and they were so convinced that they wanted to rate him in the Belmont, they ended up rating behind a 35-1 shot Pletcher horse that ran second, where I think if he would have just gone on with it, they might have won the race. And I'm just wondering, looking back with that, in the rearview mirror, does Espinosa say, well, if I'm only got to get in front of materiality, maybe I just jump the gate a little bit?
I think looking back at California Chrome's Belmont, the biggest mistake they made in that race was the post-race interview and the interview the next morning, because those were atrocious. I mean, the idea that you should have to run in 2 races to run in the Belmont. The idea of being a champion is you take on all comers. Look, in golf and in tennis, they offer the U.S. Open. It's open to everyone that can qualify. That's what makes a champion. To sit there on TV and to say something that's silly and to point your finger at the crowd like you know best was embarrassing at best.
What Mark had said too about the race strategy. If you're training materiality and you're riding materiality and you've drawn outside of Pharoah, okay, you're the only other horse with tactical speed in the race. Do you let Pharoah go and do you try to just sit outside of him and try to be better than him down the lane? Or do you try to take it to him and take the lead on him? I mean,
You get him as uncomfortable as you possibly can.
Yeah.
You try and make it where he cannot take a deep breath. For riders with, like as Tom said, Todd has a formula for winning up there.
yeah.
That's
So you want to be at his neck.
you want to
If
be.
he's out and he outbreaks you,
You can't-
want to be at his neck.
You can't look. He proved it in the Preakness. They gave him a length and a half, and it was over. Like he got a little breather around the turn in the Derby, and he run after Gary Stevens. Gary Stevens run locked down on him, and he went away. He will fight, but I don't know if he'll fight going 1.5 miles when he has to fight from start to finish. If I was riding materiality, I'd be sitting right on the shoulder. I would not give him a chance to throw his ears up and relax.
So that's an interesting point. Look, I'm not going to pretend to be Todd Pletcher. He's great at what he does, and Johnny Velasquez also is great at what he does. If you are naive enough to think they're not having this exact conversation and devising a plan, they know exactly what they're going to do going into this race.
Right.
I'm not going to pretend that I know what they're going to do, but it seems pretty obvious to me that the plan has got to be on his throat latch, to never let him get out of their sight in the race, and to try to take it to him late and hope that they weaken him in the end.
And I got a feeling that Kieran McLaughlin and Joe Alvasario have no problem with that.
I have to agree with
Right?
that. Yeah,
I mean, 'cause
right.
that gives them the best opportunity as well.
Well, not only is Frosted hanging back there, but Pletcher does have the Made from Lucky who can come off it, and so one advantage if there is a little bit of a battle up front is he's got a horse coming off it.
I think we have some fan.
We have some fan questions. So for James, Nancy M says, Chicago girl here, I love watching you ride at Arlington. Why the switch to Del Mar?
Change of scenery.
Gee, and to think I was going to say De Niro.
A new challenge.
I get that.
Looking forward to taking another step forward in my career. It's about time. Hopefully go out to Del Mar and have some fun and bring the kids out, let them vacation a little bit while I'm working my rear end off. But that's the way I am.
Have you ridden there?
I've never ridden at Del Mar, and as I said, it's going to be a challenge.
Yeah. Because there's a lot of things that do you have any promises from any trainers to say, James, I know you're coming, I'll definitely help you out, or is it completely clean slate?
It's completely clean slate, which is okay.
Am I allowed to ask who's going to handle your book out there?
Yes, you are.
Who is it?
It's Brad Pegram.
Oh, good. So you've got somebody that's a veteran
Yes.
California agent, and he's very good at his job.
Yeah.
So he's had Mike Smith amongst others, so he'll do a good job for you.
And,
That's great.
This was the plan from early on in the year before my agent got sick. So we're just rolling along. We're enjoying what we're doing, and we're going to have some more fun and see what that brings us.
So James' longtime agent is Britt McGahee, who is sick. And I don't know if Britt's watching, but we want you to get well soon. We're all thinking about you, and it's not the same out here without you.
Yeah, right on.
What else, Ember?
So Diane T says, I'm from New Orleans. She wants to congratulate both of you on being top trainer, top jockey, last meet at Fairgrounds. What makes that track so special for both of you, and is it your favorite track to race and ride at?
You want to go with that?
You go ahead with that, Jack.
So I'm from New Orleans. I grew up there. I went to LSU. And the first job I ever had at the racetrack as a hot walker was in the barn that I train in right now. So I can walk in that barn after a bad day in the morning and remember waking up to make $90 a week, 7 days a week, walking horses.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
And I love New Orleans. And I love the fans there because they're into it. And I would say that when I go to the races, although I don't know hardly any of their names, the guys that hang out in the grandstand, we always say hello to each other. It's home. It feels like home. I'd rather win there than anywhere in the world.
Follow that, James.
Hey, me and Lisa have also made it our home. It's been a pleasure to go back for the last 10 or 11 seasons. But I like the fairgrounds. The stretch caters to my riding style, my aggressiveness on horses towards the end of a race, which a lot of trainers, like Tom says, is just, that's why he employs me, is because of that. I'm not one to give up. It's just, the track suits me, I guess.
I agree with that. Yeah, I think it suits James very well.
Did you miss having Rosie in the jocks room this year? I mean, she was so good there. And
but riders, you build up friendships with them, and some you get along better with than others. And Rosie, I could say, I got along great with her, and it was.
she won a lot of races.
Yeah.
So in fairness, the room is a fraternity. I mean, most of the people are very close in that room. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Some guys are closer to others than, like, say.
Very few enemies in the room.
Yeah. But out on the racetrack, and the gloves are off.
Well, yeah, everybody wants to win.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've seen that in a few inquiries.
Yeah.
That the gloves are definitely off.
What about the new rider that comes in, the bug rider, like a Sebastian Saez or somebody that he's 16 years old? I mean, I don't care how good of a natural rider you are. You still have to learn some lessons out there on the track. Safety first, all that stuff. Do some of the, the elder statesmen, do they take riders like that under their wing?
We try to, but a lot of the kids nowadays, they just jump up, get a helmet, get a vest, get a stick. I want to be a jockey.
You know what?
There's
But
no
but
time.
if you went to James Graham and you asked him for advice, and not just James, but a lot of the older guys,
Yeah.
they would pull you aside and they would give you advice. Fair
Yeah,
enough?
Definitely.
Yeah.
But we try to help. You help once or twice, they turn their nose up at you, they still keep doing the mistake, and you just start shaking your head and you say, I'm done. It's like being kicked when you're asleep every day by the same guy. You turn around and you say, you want to do that again? You put your foot in here, there's a bear trap waiting.
Sometimes lessons can be taught on the track.
Exactly,
Yeah.
definitely. But we do have to look after one another. In certain circumstances, you're just gonna have to learn to sit and suffer. And sorry about your bad luck. You're not putting food on my table tonight. I'm doing that. So but it is. We take care. We'll rough house with one another, but we need to keep it safety first, and
Right.
and we try to teach them the right way without putting anybody in danger,
Right. And here we.
Tom, Kurt once says, you're one of the most positive and fan-friendly trainers, in my opinion. You always go out of your way to say hi, answer questions, and talk to people. What do the fans of the sport mean to you?
Well, they mean everything to me. I appreciate that question, and he's right. Kurt is right. I do try to get the fans involved. Look, without the fans, we have no sport. So I completely recognize that when I'm out at the racetrack doing my job, and people are betting on these horses, rooting for these horses, whatever they're doing, young kids enjoying the beauty of the sport as well as older people enjoying this beauty of the sport, that I'm lucky enough to do something I love. And I certainly want to share that with the people that are out there spending their time with that. So I appreciate that comment. I do strive to do that, and I'm very, very appreciative and supportive of the fans.
You get an opportunity too with TVG, with the work show, to kind of,
I do.
not only express your opinion, but also educate people that are watching as to what you see and why they should
Right.
look at it a certain way, right?
Look, Joe, I love to teach. When it comes to horse racing, I've been doing it since I was little. Right or wrong, I think I know. So when I'm watching a work for TVG and I'm depicting it, or I'm at the racetrack and someone's asking their opinion of my horse, and I'm telling them the pluses and minuses of the horses getting ready to run, I have no problem doing that at any time. That's something I like to do.
And how much do you enjoy doing the TVG stuff? I mean, would you do that full time at some point?
No,
or?
I would not.
The next Paul Duke, I mean.
No, I would not. I wouldn't do TVG full time simply because I don't think that I could do it on a daily basis. It involves so much. So what does it involve? So you have to know whatever race you're covering backwards and forwards, and you have to be able to speak. And of course, you're on live TV, so anything you say, that's it. It's out there. So for me, I like doing it. It's a great. I'm not going to call it distraction, but it's a great takeaway from training from time to time. So I enjoy that a great deal, but full time, not for me.
Well, I mean, right now, managing your stable, I mean, that's... Talk to people about how you manage your stable, because I know this year you've got a string at Canterbury.
Yes.
You've got a string here.
Yes.
You're always looking to claim. You
Right.
You own horses for Maggie Moss, which I'd like you to speak about that a little bit too, because she's such an advocate for aftercare and for Midwest thoroughbreds. I mean, you've got a lot of clients with a lot of horses.
So it's a full-time job. Okay. So when you have a horse in your barn, your job is to make the best economic decision you can for that horse. Where can he make the most money for the owner that's entrusted you with that investment? That's the nuts and bolts of it. But then you have to bring in the personality of the horse and getting to know him. And look, nobody does this unless they love working with animals, and I love working with animals. So all those things come into play. Joe, you brought up a good point. You're talking about aftercare of horses. That's something that's come to the forefront in the last 5 or 6 years here in the thoroughbred industry, and it's important. In my opinion, as well as many others, if you have a horse entrusted to you, and particularly if you are an owner that has invested in that horse, you have a responsibility to that horse. You have a responsibility to not only treat him as an investment, but to take care of him, to take care of that investment, even if it means he's not going to make it on the racetrack, or if he suffers an injury. You need to be someone that's cognizant of what can I do to give this horse a full life, whether it's on the racetrack or not. And as a trainer, I'm going to remind you of that. I don't have to remind Maggie Moss, and I don't have to remind Rich and Karen Papis of Midwest Thoroughbreds. They are first and foremost to do those kind of things with their horses. But there are people out there that haven't gotten the message yet, that don't recognize that these horses are giving us a living. You, me, James, all of us here. So we have a responsibility to them to take care of them and make sure that they are taken well care of. And I will be someone, and I don't mind saying it because I've said it before, I will be someone that makes sure that the horses that I'm responsible for always have good lives. So if we decide to sell a horse off the racetrack, we have a contract that says that horse cannot have any change of ownership after we sell it to you, and you have responsibility to take care of that horse. You sign that agreement with us, and oftentimes the sale price is zero on horses like that. Mm-hmm. We're not out to get any kind of money necessarily. Right. We're just out to make sure the horse is well taken care of.
Right, and obviously too, that can come back to you as an owner or a trainer. Sometimes if it's not unintended, obviously if you're taking to the extreme to sign a contract, you're trying to do everything you can to ensure that.
And I think it's important. I think you hit it right on the head, Mark. So that's not necessarily something that's happening everywhere 100% of the time, but believe me, it's coming. It's going to be 100% of the time because these majestic animals are important to us. From us making a living, we owe it to them.
It's been a huge, like you mentioned, last 5 or 6 years, I would say, a huge recognition of that.
It's overdue.
Yeah.
It's long overdue.
So
great.
we have...
A couple more questions here. Mike S. has a question for James. He says, I love Ha Cha Cha. What was it like to race on a horse like that you helped develop?
She was actually my first Grade 1 winner.
At Keeneland, right?
Yeah.
She QE2.
Yeah.
Catch a nice ticket.
That year, I started off getting on her in Chicago. I rode her in the pucker up. She come late, flew home. Man, I said, God, this is unbelievable. This filly's got more to her, So I was all excited about that. We went to Keeneland. She wins the QE2. I said, she's still developing. She's getting bigger and stronger as we go on towards the end of the year. But she was great. You put her where she wanted to be, and she'd do everything you asked her to do and wanted to do, and was willing, courageous, fought for it, did everything you'd want the thoroughbred to do, and she was one of my favourites, and that's the way it worked out for her. And just very unlucky towards the end of her career that she had an accident one morning in training, and then she was sent home, and she got bred, I think, and I don't know what happened after that.
You might ride her babies.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, a lot of James's success. So Daisy Divine, another one, Upper Line, and then the theft last year in the Arlington Classic against the boys with Istenford.
Yeah.
That was a good one.
Yeah. Do you know a lot of my big winners have been on fillies?
Yeah, right, exactly.
But
a lot of your big winners have been on the grass.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's true. All my Grade 1s, bar 1, have been on the grass. Again, I don't know what it was, but...
People don't recognize how hard it is to win a Grade 1.
Yeah.
I've won 2 in my entire career. I've got over 3,000 wins, and I've won 2 Grade 1s, and they weren't recent.
Heritage of Gold, right?
They were both with Heritage of Gold. You got a good memory.
Third in the distaff twice.
Yeah, God, you're good.
Yeah.
You are good. So she
I
won a
looked
grade.
a
She
few
won a
things
grade
up on the
1. She won a
computer.
grade 1 at Saratoga, and she won a grade 1 in Hot Springs. But that was a long, long time ago. Those are hard races to win.
That kind of really, you were on the map before that, but that's when people really started to, you're in those races and you're winning those Grade 1s and you're in those Breeders' Cup
Which is why, James, look, I know James didn't say it, but he's not going to say it, but one of the reasons you go to Belmont and you run a race like tomorrow with James Graham is that because it's a great marketing move, you know, because when people think about this winter going to New Orleans, they're going to say, who's the leading rider down there from the years past? They say, James Graham. Oh yeah, I remember him from Belmont. Even though I'm shipping in from Florida, New York, I remember that guy, and that's going to be on their list of short list for riders.
Yeah, definitely, and that's the stage is at Belmont on Saturday with all those
No
grade
question.
ones, and you're riding a $400,000 race, and wish you the best of luck. I mean, you've got. We should say that's the 6th race, is it?
Sixth,
It is.
The Brooklyn Invitational, Grade 2, 400,000, and you're riding Call Me George that won the New Orleans Handicap.
Yeah.
So we were talking about earlier. James, what are some of the other graded stakes horses or bigger up and comers that you're looking forward to riding this summer?
Well, I've been working a couple of decent ones over the last couple of weeks. Few for Tom. I don't want to mention any names,
All right.
but no, they're coming along, and we just have to hope that we're in the right place at the right time.
Mm-hmm.
Hopefully a jock can't come, or not hopefully a jock can't come in or something, or something shakes loose to where you're open. Oh, like as Tom says, I remember him from being leading rider. Remember him from last week being up at Belmont Park. Let's give him a go. Just being in the right place at the right time, and just hopefully everything falls into line, and we'll have some fun.
Tom, a lot of people are familiar with Milute. Came back and won at Belmont.
He did,
last
man.
week,
Good race.
Right? Oh, was it a 1-turn mile race?
It was a 1-turn mile.
And and he beat it. He beat a nice field and did it.
He did.
Visually impressive, stock and pounds kind of. What now? It's a different year with him. 5 years old now, right?
He's 5.
Okay, so what do we do? I mean, you got the Stephen Foster coming up.
Well, since I don't train him anymore, it's not my
Oh, it's
decision.
not?
No,
Oh, I didn't know that.
but I will tell you, my Lute is one of my favorites, and he had a great personality, super smart horse. So when a horse is smart, he usually conveys it in how he acts in the stall, and they're in their stall 22, 23 hours a day, so you get to be around him a lot. My Lute was one of those horses, and he's a horse you have to root for. So
Well, you lose some, you get some too.
Oh, of course.
Right.
So he's with Todd Pletcher now. He won a nice allowance race, and I'm sure the next race is going to be a stake somewhere. I don't know what they have in mind for him, but Todd seems to place him in the right spot.
Yeah, he does. And how do you say Delaunay?
Delaunay.
Delaunay.
What's this year look like for Delaunay?
So Delaunay is a little long in the tooth. He's no young man.
Right.
And so he's trying to compete with the young boys. So Delaunay is a horse that he's the old buck. He's the old buck that's trying to beat the young whippersnappers. And so he oftentimes he does it with smarts now. And he is a smart racehorse. You can look at his record and see how many times he's won. He knows how to get to the winner's circle. And with him, James knows him well. James has not only won on him, but worked him a number of times. And I think the best description of Delaunay was one given by Rosie Napravnik, who won on him as well. When she won the Churchill Downs Handicap 2 years ago, I think it was, she said, "This is a cool horse." And he is. He's cool. He's extremely laid back in his stall. He knows me. Believe it or not, very few horses recognize people as they come and go, but he's one that does. I visit him every afternoon and give him a peppermint when I'm because look, we work in the barn early in the morning, we work in the afternoon as well. So when he gets his meal in the evening, I always give him a peppermint. And I've told his owner Maggie Moss that when he retires, I'm retiring with him. I want him to have a place with me.
Oh, great.
So maybe we'll go out together. Although I'm not ready to go yet, and he is an 8-year-old, so maybe his time will come before mine.
Would he come back as a stable pony though? Is that something that could happen? I mean, not every horse is
I
cut
hope
out
not.
for that.
I hope not. I hope he has a life where I know his personality well, and without speaking directly to him, I think that what he would like to do is graze.
Yeah.
So I hope he has a big pasture with plenty of green grass.
That's terrific.
Rhea Antonia, is she?
She's a mama.
Okay, she
Yeah,
did. She was
she's a
bred.
mama. She
Okay.
went to Japan. She's been bred. I'm gonna miss her too. She was a big for a filly, and had the most gorgeous stride you ever saw. When they gave her to me, they said, "You have to run her in the Preakness." I was like, "Oh God!" So
I wasn't going to ask.
I called a couple of confidants and I said, "What's going to happen if I run this horse in the Preakness?" And they said, "Well, I think the owner will take a lot of abuse and you'll take very little." So I said,
That's
and
very
they said,
accurate.
and they said, in the end, you get to keep the horse and do what you want after that. So we did just that, and she was a better horse than she ran the Preakness that day, for the record. But but I loved working with her. She was easy. She didn't take any special attention, and you asked her to do something, she would do it. She ran fourth in the most recent distaff, Breeders' Cup distaff. Second in the Keeneland race. What's the name of it? Big race, the Ashland, right?
Ashland, right?
Yeah. Second before that. Those are big races for her, and she sold for quite a bit of money. I think 1.8 million at the Keeneland sale, and she went to Japan.
Interesting. Do we have any other fan questions? Because I think
That was
we're
one of the
getting.
fan questions.
We're-
Rhea Antonio just talking about that and your opinions of her.
I think we have a fan question from the gallery over here about a famous racehorse.
Well, we had one question. Tom, are you planning on sending any horses to the Indiana Derby?
No, I'm no longer racing in Indiana Grand. I've been the leading trainer there for 3 years, and I'm getting ready to serve a suspension for a positive test of 1 nanogram, which is 1/1000th of a gram of methocarbamol. That's a violation that is no longer a violation in Indiana, but it was in 2011. It's not a violation anywhere in the United States, but I've been prosecuted on it, and this year they decided that despite the fact that it was no longer a violation, that I was going to get a 60-day suspension for it. I fought that. I got it reduced to 45 days. I'm going to have to take that suspension, and so I told them I no longer want to race with them.
That's
Can't
tough.
blame you for that.
A billionth of an what is that?
Right. It's called a nanogram, and that's 1/1000th of a gram.
Wow.
And that's not a violation anywhere in the United States, including Indiana.
Today.
But the executive secretary, the executive director there, a man named Joe Gorchak, still felt it was important to send a message, and so he suspended me.
That's tough, and I mean, in a lot of jurisdictions, these rules are still there. The thresholds really don't make a lot of sense, and
Right.
the trainer has ultimate liability for what goes on. It's kind of scary, isn't it?
Yeah, so I've never been suspended in my life. I've trained horses since 1987, and I've never ever been accused of a violation that would involve a suspension. And if you'd asked me when I got involved in racing whether I would ever serve a suspension for a medication violation, I would have said that would be impossible, because I would never break the rules to win a race. That's just not in my nature. It's not the way I was taught by the guys I was brought up underneath. My parents didn't teach me that, and so for this to be happening is it's an embarrassment. I'm ashamed from the standpoint that people are going to read about that when it happens, but I'm totally convinced at the end of the day that I didn't do anything wrong, and I'm disappointed that they don't agree with me in Indiana. And look, I'm hopeful that someday Indiana gets their act together, because I'm not the only one that's suffered their archaic penalties, and it's going on right now. And I'm hopeful that they'll come to their senses. And even if it means I serve my suspension, I hope that in the end they get their act together, because the actual racetracks itself there are great places to race. The crowds are great, and I enjoyed racing there. So it was a disappointment not to come back.
Yeah. Does racing need to get a uniform medication policy?
They're trying to do that now, and I think that's a good thing. I think the problem with what's going on right now is that whenever someone is accused of anything, or a positive is found in anything, there's this rush to judgment by the public that this is a bad guy and he's done a bad thing. In the case of what I have a positive for, which is methocarbamol, that is an approved therapeutic drug that we're allowed to use, and we're allowed to use it as long as it meets below a threshold. 1/1000th of a gram is below the threshold. So yes, we use it on that horse, and I'd be the first to admit we use it. It's a muscle relaxant for body sore horses. These are elite athletes, and they go out there and they train every single day like an elite athlete trains. The idea that they're not going to have their little minor aches and pains is silly. You're not being realistic compared to other sports, and you recognize that. So, we want to do the best we can to make them the most comfortable we can within the limits of making sure we're not hiding an unsoundness of any kind. Methocarbamol doesn't hide an unsoundness. And so, not only does the industry need to get their act together, but the industry, as far as medication goes, but the industry needs to get a better understanding of who's out there trying to do something nefarious, something in the way of cheating, and there are very few of those people out there. And what is a mistake? Right now in Kentucky, we have a situation with Kellen Gorder, who's been accused of giving a barbiturate, but these levels are so low that the idea that he actually did something like that is silly.
Yeah.
It didn't happen. So, ideas like contamination, when you're not only going down to the billionths of a gram, but there's also something called a picogram, which is a trillionth of a gram. Now, think of a gram as a one-a-day vitamin. That's a full gram.
Yeah.
Now, break that down into 1/trillionth.
Wow.
What is that? So,
It's a speck.
when you start doing that kind of thing, you have to start recognizing that there are other variables that come into play here. Environmental contamination. For instance, in my barn, in the afternoon, we feed a program that I learned from Jack Van Berg when I was in high school working for him. And it involves what we call a mash, which means we add hot water to our feed in the afternoon. And that needs to be stirred and mix the brew like you would mix for a soup. What might be on the groom's hand?
Right.
Would that come up?
Right.
Would that come up as
Right.
1/trillionth
Yeah.
of a gram? Well, maybe so.
Yeah.
But does it have any real bearing on the outcome of a race? Did the trainer really try to do something? We have to get realistic about what's going on here and what is a person trying to cheat and what is a mistake.
It's not black and white.
It certainly
It's
isn't.
not
Right.
black and white. And
Yeah.
like you said, when you're hiring people too, I would assume that has to be a consideration that these people are handling your horses.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's
So that's
another example. We've got a case in Indiana right now with a trainer that came up with a positive for Ritalin, which is something they use with kids that have a learning,
Right.
That they don't pay attention a lot.
ADD,
And look,
yeah.
Ritalin is the most easy thing to pick up in the world. There's no way he gave Ritalin to his horse. This is a mistake, and it's a contamination, but is it going to be treated that way? He's facing a full year suspension.
Yeah.
They will wreck his career if they follow through with it.
That's
And is it
crazy.
fair? No, it's not fair.
That's tough. Yeah. What
I
else? All
think
right.
I think we're close to wrap up time. Do we have any other fan?
We have one more question, and it's for both of you guys. Can you guys each talk about your most memorable horse?
Oh, that's a good question.
Yeah. Doesn't have to be your biggest, just your
Yeah, I mean memorable. That's different than biggest.
You go first. It better be one of mine. I'm kidding.
I was actually going to say, I still remember one of the first horses that I ever rode for you. Well, she wasn't very memorable. Well, she was the first time I rode her. No, but probably one that sticks out was probably Daisy Divine. She was the most consistent. She showed up every time she ran. I think she missed the board twice in her whole career, maybe 3 times, and that was it. She was just when she got into her rhythm, she was brilliant. She did it the right way. She always went out there, had her little run around there, and was just happy doing it. So
That was for Andrew McKeever.
Yeah.
A lot of disrespect from the betting public on her too, because she
Always.
always went off at higher odds
Yes.
that I
Yeah.
thought she should have.
She never stopped. She just kept going.
we got out in the lead in a grade 1. They let me slow it down. They let me go 50. Couldn't do it with her. She sprinted home, and she sprinted home with good fillies. Like, it wasn't like that she just beat an ordinary bunch. She beat fillies that came on and ran good in the Breeders' Cup and
Right.
so on and so forth. And she was just, Daisy was Daisy.
There you go. Tom?
So my favorite type of horse is the one where after a race that you've won or run well in, you made a difference. There are a lot of really good horses that are going to win no matter what you do. But I guess going way back in time is probably not even still in the books anymore. When I first started training, I trained a horse named Sweet Agarita. And she had run a few times and she'd never done anything. And the owner gave her to me and said, if you don't like the way she trains, you can give her away. And she won, I think, 11 races out of 13 that year for me. And I know that we made a difference with her. I shouldn't say I, because it's a stable. And that's always a mistake, because the stable consists of what you do on the racetrack, which involves gallop boys or girls, what you do in the barn, which involves grooms, and then of course your training program. So when you're training horses, the idea that Tom Amoss Racing Stable is Tom Amoss that's a silly idea. Well, James will tell you that. James has been around a lot of our help, and to be a successful trainer, You have to always have your ears open. You have to constantly be paying attention to the information you're getting from your people. It has to be an open line of communication. You should never feel like you're the smartest guy in the room, because that keeps people from holding back and saying what they want to say. And I'm staring at a former assistant of mine across the way there, Brent Sumja, and he knows that that's true. We all do it together. And so to be a good trainer, it's a team effort.
Yeah, definitely. And how many horses do you have in training?
I have about 60 right now, and I keep between 60 and 80. Never more than 80. I've been bigger than that. It doesn't work for me. I don't do the same job, whether it's because of the help or whatever. We just don't simply win as often, and we seem to make mistakes. So I know what my limit is. 80 is my limit. I won't take more than that, and I have about 60 right now.
When one gets claimed from you, is it a matter of replacement? To where if you lose a couple, you now have the liberty, especially for a Maggie Moss, to go back in when you see something that you think is worthwhile?
Well, I think we're seeing something start to happen in horse racing over the last few years, and it's now prominent this year, and that is that if you're not claiming, you're gonna die on the vine.
This Churchill has been unbelievable.
So when you look at guys that are claiming at Churchill right now, they're guys that in the past have never been the claiming trainers. I've always been a claiming trainer, so I know the guys I'm competing with to claim horses for. And in the last 2 years, there have been more people that are now claiming horses that I'm competing with to claim a horse than ever before. Mm-hmm. So the business is changing as far as that goes. I don't know what the reason for that is, except that I would guess that there are some guys that claim so many horses that they're depleting a lot of trainers, and that is a resource to get new horses. But as far as when we lose a horse, certainly I want to get a replacement, but I want a good replacement. So right now we're 3 stalls short, empty stalls at Churchill Downs, but I'm not saying to myself, I've got to have a horse tomorrow.
Right.
I want to get the right horse.
Right. With more trainers getting into the claiming business or claiming horses, does that give you an advantage because you've been doing it for so long?
I think it does a couple of things. Number one, for me to be successful as a claiming trainer, I need to be able to lose horses when the time is right, as well as gain horses when the time is right. It's a little harder to gain horses. It's a lot easier to lose horses that maybe aren't good investments. Look, claiming is all about what you paid for the horse, what the owner is paying in a day rate, and how can you make that investment as good as it can possibly be. And if the horse is not exactly what you thought it was in the claim box, what's the avenue to get the owner out that's going to cost the least amount of money to him on his investment? I mean, that's my responsibility as a trainer. So with the claiming game as active as it is, particularly at Churchill, like you mentioned, Joe, there is no issue with moving a horse down the ladder, running him in a spot he can win, and losing him the claim if that's what you wish to do.
Because the purses are good enough where you can, if you've had a little success with a horse that you've claimed, drop below the claim level and still do well.
Exactly
because
right.
the purses are good enough where you can do
Right,
that.
exactly right. You claim one for $15,000, you run for $10,000 on paper. It says, well, I've lost $5,000 doing that, and I've lost the training time as well, which is probably another couple of thousand. But if you can win that race,
Yeah.
you can make that a break-even proposition.
Yeah.
Yeah, a big part of the game as growing the stable, and also, like you said, is managing the stable. Heard once upon a time that you were working to purchase a horse named Cigar and almost got him in the barn.
That's one of those. That's one of those stories that's almost folklore, because I don't think people believe it. But I've not only got a witness across the room, I've got the guy that convinced me to do it, and that's Brent Sumja. So we had made a decision to go to California. We were in Louisiana exclusively at this time. This was going back in time. And Brent was in California, my former assistant, Brent Sumja, and he was training on his own out there. And I asked him if he would go to Del Mar and start marking horses. By marking horses, I mean looking at horses in the paddock, seeing what he thought were potential athletes for us, and giving me the information. If we claimed them, we would share in their success together. So on this particular day, Cigar was running in a maiden race on the grass, and Brent had warned me going into the race. He said, this is a good horse that loses his composure in the paddock. And he came to the paddock, and he got very hot and sweaty. He did just that. He ran like 4th or thereabouts. He was a colt then. And our idea was to get him off the grass, which would have been a good move, as it was when Bill Mott finally moved him off the grass. But it was also to geld him, which would have been a good move for Lloyd's of London. When his career was over, they insured him as a stallion.
That's right.
And he was not fertile. And they had to pay off a huge sum of money. If I had claimed him or I had bought him at that time with Brent, they never would have paid that multi-million-dollar fee they would have had to pay. But as it turned out, he ran that day, and Brent went to Alan Paulson's manager and made an offer of $100,000 for the horse. That was on a Friday. They liked the offer. They said, give us the weekend to think about it. And on Monday they said, no, we're not going to do it. So he stayed racing on the grass with no success all the way until the winter when Bill Mott got him. And they put him on the dirt. And the rest is, as they say, history.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's amazing.
16 in a row.
That's a
Wow.
great
Yeah.
story.
That's
I
something.
didn't know you tried to buy it.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Good stuff.
All right, with that,
I think we're good, right? Any other fan questions?
No, I think we pretty much.
it was
Fantastic,
fantastic.
yeah.
Thank you so much for joining us and coming down here,
Had a
talking
great time.
racing,
Thanks for
and
having
yeah,
I
fantastic.
had a great time. I got to be with a friend. No better than that.
Well, we'll have to keep watching for you guys. And what's the percentage? The 29% this year?
29% last year, 26% over the last 5
Man, you
years.
better step up your game.
That's over the last 5 years, Tom. Oh my God.
See, success
hear it
comes from
already.
being. If you're not demanding, you don't succeed.
It's true. It is true.
Demand success. That's
But
right.
those are incredible numbers. And James, Tom, thank you so much for your time. And we're going to take a very short break, and then we're going to be back with the Derby Wars webcast game. So, everybody, thanks to James, thanks to Tom. Mark and I'll be back in just a few minutes. So stick around.